The thing that's always a big mistake is going after a giant market on day one, because that's typically evidence that, that you somehow haven't defined the categories correctly, and it normally means that there's going to be too much competition in one way or another. And so I think almost all the successful companies in Silicon Valley had some model of starting with small markets and expanding. And if you take Amazon, you start with just a bookstore. We have all the books in the world, so it's a better bookstore than anybody else has in the world when it starts in the 90s. It's online. There's things you can do you can't do before, and then you gradually expand into all sorts of different forms of e-commerce and other things beyond that. eBay. You start with Pez dispensers. You move on to Beanie Babies. And eventually, it's all these different auctions for all these sorts of different goods. And what's very counterintuitive about many of these companies is they often start with markets that are so small that people don't think that they're valuable at all when you get started. The PayPal version of this was we started with power sellers on eBay, which was about 20,000 people. When we first saw this happening in December of '99, January 2000, right after we launched, there was a sense that these were all, it was such a small market, it was terrible, we thought these were terrible customers to have, it's just people selling junk on the internet, why in the world do we want to be going after this market? But there was a way to get a product that was much better for everybody in that market. You could, and we got to something like 25, 30% market penetration in 2 or 3 months, and you got some lock-in, you got brand recognition, and you're able to build the business from there. So I always think these very small markets are quite underrated. The Facebook version of this I always give is that the initial market at Facebook was 10,000 people at Harvard. It went from 0 to 60% market share in 10 days. That was a very auspicious start. The way this gets analyzed in business schools is always, that's ridiculous. It's such a small market, it can't have any value at all. And so I think the business school analysis of Facebook early on, or of PayPal early on, or of eBay early on, is that the markets were perhaps so small as to have almost no value. And they would have had little value had they stayed small, but it turned out there were ways to then grow them concentrically, and that's what made them so valuable. And so you want to be a one-of-a-kind company where it's the only one in a small ecosystem. You don't want to be the 4th online pet food company. You don't want to be the 10th thin film solar panel company. You don't want to be the 100th restaurant in Palo Alto. Your restaurant industry is a $1 trillion industry. So if you do a market size analysis, you conclude restaurants are a fantastic business to go into. And it's often large markets, large existing markets typically mean that you have tons of competition, very, very hard to differentiate. So the first very counterintuitive idea is to go after small markets, often markets that are so small people don't even notice them, they don't think that they make sense. That's where you get a foothold, and then if those markets are able to expand, you can scale into a big monopoly business.
The second thing that's really important is that whatever idea you come up with in your ivory tower is not going to work. Okay, because you come up with something in your head where you think, okay, there's this offering gap, I can go and I can do it. And what will happen is that when you go talk to customers, they'll say, no, I don't need this, right? But the important thing that you have to do is that you have to really, really pay attention to what your customer's telling you. So what will happen is in the conversation that you're having, they might make a passing remark, I don't need this, but if you had something like this, I would be interested. When they say something like that, what you got to do is drop your stupid idea and go all in on what they're saying, because they're going to tell you what the real offering gap is. So whatever you came up with is useless and doesn't exist. What one customer tells you is just pure gold. So I'll give you an example. I remember there's a really good friend of mine in Chicago, Viresh Bhatia. Viresh is this kind of maverick kind of computer geek. And he had done a lot of different kind of software tools and different. He was like 19 or 20 years old, and he was going to this software tools trade show to show off all his different tools he had built. Like, he was trying to do like Google Maps 25 years ago. The computing couldn't handle it 30 years ago. Like, it was going to fail, So, but he had all these ideas about different things he wanted to do. So he's making kind of the background for his booth, and he had these 7 tools he wanted to talk about. So it was like 4 on one side, 4 bullets, and then 3 on the other side. It wasn't matching. So he wanted like 8 bullets instead of 7 bullets. And so he comes up with a fictional product which doesn't exist, and he makes that the 8th bullet. Okay. And then 2 days in the trade show, no one has any interest in any of his bullets. Okay. This one guy who's got a booth across the aisle from him has spent 2 days looking at those 8 bullets. Okay. And after 2 days, just before he's like wrapping up, he comes across the aisle to talk to him. He said, I want that 8th bullet product. Okay. So Viresh said, okay, I can get it to you in about 6 weeks, or like, I can do it. Sure. It turns out the 8th bullet became Install Shield. Okay. The tool we all use to install anything on Windows. Right. So Viresh basically created Install Shield because the guy across the aisle came to him and says, I need that install tool to install my software. So that's what I want. And so he goes back, he creates Install Shield for this one customer. And then he realizes no one has any interest in any other nonsense he's working on. And then he goes all in on Install Shield. And Viresh is now, walked off into the sunset, doing just great, doing just fine. I think he was retired in his 30s, part of computer folklore, great, worked out great. So I think the really important thing is that your customer will always tell you. They'll tell you what you need to do. What happens with most of us is we are too headstrong to listen. You have to, sometimes it'll just be a passing remark. Because they're not going to tell you, listen, build this or do this. They'll say, oh, I wish I had this, or something like that will come up in conversation. And you have to really pay attention. And I think that's really important, because it's really difficult as an entrepreneur without having all the market know-how to really understand what is going on.
A friend of mine who, like me, was a trader, he was a former partner at Goldman Sachs, an oil trader. So he talks like oil traders, got in a very bad idea to invest in a restaurant business. And if I have one piece of advice, in case I die here, just don't invest in a restaurant business. Don't open a restaurant, okay? Unless you really want to lose your money slowly, all right, or sometimes quickly in New York City. So he discovered the following, that the restaurant business has a lot of prizes. The best sushi in Lower Manhattan, the best sushi with music, the sushi without, whatever. So you have all these categories, okay? And then there is a best restaurant in that category, all right? The best rare steak, the best T-bone, whatever, west of the Hudson. You have all these categories. And there are prizes, actually. Now, who decide on these prizes? Journalists and other restaurant owners. There is a gala dinner where they give these prizes. And guess what? Most restaurants who got prizes were closed, were shut down, all right? Were shut down, out of business, okay? So it tells you the following. Any business where you're judged by your peers and not by some contact with reality is gonna rot eventually, all right? And that's why companies go bust, that's what happens. Now, this person, I think, is a plumber, right? Are plumbers judged by other plumbers, or they're judged by, okay, they're judged by other plumbers, no? No, they're judged by you, you're the client. Okay, very good. So if they may love you, other plumbers, but that's it. So any business where you have contact with reality in the form of your client judging you, okay, has fewer what I call expert problem, which I outlined in the Black Swan.
The next mistake of entrepreneurs is they believe that they should do things serially, which is to do things one at a time. First you raise money, then you build a team, then you write the software, then you ship, then you collect. Okay, that's a serial world. The serial world in entrepreneurship does not exist. Unfair as it may seem, if you are an entrepreneur, you are going to have to be raising money, writing software, prototyping, selling, recruiting, and collecting money, all at the same time. It is all these paths moving down the road at the same time. It is not a serial process. It is a parallel process. You need to understand that's how the world works, that it is all about moving multiple things down the road. In a perfect world, I grant you, it would be nice if all you could do was focus on money, and then all you had to do is focus on hiring, and then all you had to do is focus on programming, and then all you had to do is focus on selling, and then all you had to do is focus on collecting. That is not the real world. The real world is you have to do all that at once.
All three of us up here are tinkerers. Like I, was early on tinkering with Twitter for philosophy. You, Sahil, you're tinkering with Gumroad in like the weird way that you run it. You're tinkering on the crowdfunding side. You were tinkering on rolling funds. I was tinkering on how to mechanize angel investing in VC. I was kind of opening things up with the blogs on venture hacks, and that was tinkering. Ben, you were tinkering on stratechery and dithering. Like we're tinkerers, right? And I think most successful creators are ultimately tinkerers. They're just kind of playing around at the edges of their field on something that is interesting to them. It's not really with some strong motive. It's play. It's not really with a motive to like create something great out of it. It's because they're genuinely interested. And most tinkering is wasted. It's like when your kids are playing, most of that time is, quote unquote wasted. But once in a while, it will result in something which for a child might be a hobby, and for an adult, it might be a vocation.
Yeah, I think it's also inherently low status, right? I think you kind of spend years not making any money and maybe not building an audience and getting really good at a skill, but you don't have any way to know if that's actually going to turn into anything. That sort of turning into something is, kind of happens all at once 10 years later.
Well, I think there's something too about learning how to be in your particular moment, and people get so fixed 5-10 years in the future, particularly when it comes to their career. And the real danger is you end up like succeeding, and then you ended up in a place that's just not very relevant or interesting, or there's a ton of competition. And I look back like how I ended up what I'm doing, and Jobs had the quote, you look backwards, you connect the dots. Learning, I was, maximizing whatever I was doing at that particular time. That's what pays off. And you see so many people get so distracted about where they want to go, and they don't take full advantage of the spot that they're in. And then you look backwards like, man, I wish I would have spent that time better because I could have really used that experience, and it's already too late.
You certainly don't want to plan for trying to predict too much in the future. Like, I think the worst title you can possibly have in your bio is futurist. First of all, it's just tone deaf, but when someone says futurist and it's like, they're trying too hard. They're trying too hard to live in the future. When, yes, you're right. Your only moment of power and knowledge is the present. You just act from the present. It's not to say you shouldn't have like goals and plans and those kinds of things. It's kind of nice to have them loosely held, but if you stick too closely to them, you'll miss reality. Reality is very fluid and very complex, and it's much more about navigating from the small set of options presented to you, much more choose your own adventure style than, top-down Soviet style planning with 5-year plans and I'm going to get to A, then B, then C.
No, I think the other thing with that too, you do need a long-term goal, but that gives you a way to think about the immediate term options, right? Like, so I have 3 options today that are not my long-term goal. I know the general direction I'm going, so I can choose this one that maybe is suboptimal or maybe seems further, but I'm building up a particular skill or getting a particular sort of experience that will get me closer to that long-term goal without having, like a 5-year plan. I think that's the exact wrong way to go about it.
Well, I think it's what's so difficult when someone asks someone who's successful, like, why did you become successful? And it basically forces, I feel like, the person to lie. Because you look back, connect the dots, and then you can't help but sort of believe that it sort of happened on purpose, and that you sort of had, you can't remember what it was like to not know where you were going.
Yeah, first I picked sperm number 3,768,412 that then routed its way to egg number 14 on the exact date of blah, blah, blah. Right?
No, so
And the
it's
story
funny.
begins.
Oh, sorry. Oh no, it was funny. I told this story on this week's Exponent exactly, where it's hilarious that I'm known as the newsletter guy. It was a total accident where I had the vision to have a subscription base. One was all website centric, and it was a total disaster. And I actually launched it on a Thursday. It was a total mess. I tore it out over the weekend. I told people, like, look, I just screwed up the website style for anyone that's not a subscriber. It's the wrong direction. I'm just going to email you. If you subscribe, I'll email you additional stuff in addition to the website. It's like literally like a spur of the moment. I have to fix this problem, figure it out. How am I going to get content to my subscribers without having a bad experience for non-subscribers? And then now today I'm the newsletter guy. It's like, so there, when you look backwards, if you're actually honest about it, there's a lot of luck for sure, and a lot of like just in the right moment, taking the right choice.
It's funny. AngelList has a similar story because first there was a network for sharing deal flow that Nivi and I built, or mostly Nivi built, called the Pound Deal Flow Network. It was literally a little social network with a feed, and you could follow people, and nobody used it. And then he built a Google group, and nobody used that either. And then finally, we're like, screw it, none of this is working. Just freaking email them the data, and that was AngelList.
Now I will end with some reflections. Peter Thiel argues that to build a profitable business, you have to deliver something unique and valuable to a group of people. Now let's adapt this idea to a passage from the book The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which I think adds some insightful nuances to this concept. You can go on the internet and you can find your audience and you can build a business and create a product and build wealth and make people happy just uniquely expressing yourself through the internet. The internet enables any niche interest as long as you're the best person at it to scale out. And the great news is because every human is different, everyone is the best at something, being themselves. So you can deliver something unique just by being yourself. And then if a sufficiently sized group of people on the internet resonates with your content or find your products useful, you can build a profitable business, and even better, a profitable business that is also aligned with your ideas and character. And as you keep exploring your curiosity, that group of people will naturally expand to a bigger group. Something that is really unique and valuable about being a content creator is that the product and the distribution are essentially the same thing. So if you're a content creator, by default, you build the business in a parallel way. You build the product and the distribution at the same time. As Alex Hormozzi said in a conversation with the famous YouTuber Unspeakable, it is one of the unique things about the media business. How you market the product is also how you fulfill it. Besides, there is no need for external financing given the super tiny upfront investments and costs involved in the content creation business model. And in most cases, it's not even necessary to have a team of people. Another cool thing is that once you get some traction, you immediately get the feedback from the viewers and subscribers. So you can optimize your content and products much more based on what people actually want rather than your intuition about what they want. As Paul Graham wrote on his book Hackers and Painters, you want to keep the time to market as short as possible in order to eventually come up with something that people will actually want. And if you want to become a content creator on YouTube, you might want to check out my services and free courses, all linked down in the description. If you found the ideas of Peter Thiel, Nassim Taleb, Naval Ravikant, and Sahil Lavingia interesting and you want to learn more, I recommend you to check out Shortform, where you can find super insightful study guides from all of their books as well as hundreds of other interesting books. But if you want to go deep into their wisdom and invest the time, then I would definitely read their full books. Shortform has made me smarter in many areas of my life, and I use it to quickly discover interesting ideas from hundreds of books and to revisit the main ideas of books that I have already read. The cost is equivalent to the price of one book a month, and you can use my affiliate link shortform.com/pickingnuggets to get a 5-day free trial and a 20% discount on the annual subscription.